So I don't know whether we know this or not, or whether you have recognized this or not. The fact of the matter is, we speak using words. At the same time, we also think using words. I don't know whether you have recognized it or not. But psychologists as well as linguists, and even in our own experience, they understand, and we have come to know that not only do we speak using words, we also think using words. Some people have the ability to think using images, or they think in form of images. But almost all human beings, they have a tendency to, not a tendency, inherent nature is to think using words. That is why we have sometimes, we speak to ourselves because we would like to hear ourselves. Our mind speaks to us. We see in Psalms 32, or in one of those corridors of the 30s, that the wicked speaks in his own mind, thinks in his own mind. The foolish says that there is no God. Because speech comes after thought. Of course, there are times when we speak without thinking. Yes, there are times. But we speak without thinking because we don't have to think for those things that we speak. For example, in anger, let's say if we use a curse word in anger, it is because we in our conscience and in our mind have said it's okay. 90% of the time we may not use it. But that 1% of that time, or 10% of that time, when we get really angry, because we have not completely cut off that word from our mind, it keeps on coming. Right? Though immediately we catch ourselves and say, well, I was not thinking, it just came out of my mouth. Yes, it is true, it came out of the mouth. That is because the person has made it normal. It is normal for the person. It is okay for a person. It is not abomination to that person to think in that terms. Therefore, of course, in a normal conversation, we may not use it regularly, but because even from the mind, that word is not eradicated. That word is always there. It just comes out in our anger. Same thing with thoughts. So we think using words, we speak using words. Now, we should have the freedom of thought, which implies that we should have the freedom of speech. Right? Everybody should be free to think anything in their mind. Now, if there should be freedom of mind, then there should be freedom of thought. Freedom of speech. But because our mind is corrupt and we are not able to think rightly many times, or quite often, we are given the scriptures, the boundaries through the commandments of God as to what we need to think, right? The scriptures tell us what we need to think, because thinking comes first before speech. Thinking comes first before speech. The scriptures are not, basically written for our physical side. The scriptures are written for our metaphysical, which is basically our mind, our heart, our conscience. The scriptures have to be applied there. It is not enough to apply and understand the scriptures and say it is really good. No, the scriptures have to go deep into our metaphysical, our mind, our heart, and transform the channels of thought, right? It has to transform the channels of thought within our life. If we are able to transform the channel of thought, then we will be able to transform what? Our speech. Otherwise, we'll never be able to transform our speech. And that's why some people, though they don't speak things when they are conscious, when they are sleeping, they will speak because it's in their subconscious mind, right? So mind has two portions to it, which is, of course, it's psychology, but we all experience it. There are some things that we speak in our sleep that we don't even know what you're speaking, but somebody else has heard it and they say, hey, you spoke this last night. What was going on? Well, then you say, no, I don't remember speaking it because it was in your subconscious, conscious mind. All of the mind has to be transformed. All of the mind has to be transformed. So we are given this time here on earth as we live here. If we are purely using the commandments to regulate our external life, but we do not follow the commandments in our internal life, then you are nothing. You cannot bear any fruit. We are useless before God. We are living in the Old Testament, but the purpose of our life is to live the resurrection life. So in short, our thinking has to be right. Then our speech and action will follow. But many times and oft, we don't change our thinking, right? We should not even think a curse word. Then you can be sure that a curse word will not come out of your mouth at any point in time. We should not think enmity when somebody really deals nasty with you. Then we can be sure that, at any point in time, we will not deal in enmity. Same thing with revenge, right? So transformation of the thought life, which is what the purpose of the commandment is. Internalizing the words of God so that you are transformed from within. Your heart is cleansed and purified. Of course, by the blood, because of your natural ways and the sin that comes out of our natural ways. But then the word of God is there to sanctify us, Vishuddhigariya, so that we will not do what we want to do. The Holy Spirit is also on our side. Or we will not do what we are used to doing. That is called sanctification, Vishuddhigariya. Let me tell you, we are often focused on not saying a particular matter. Oh, let us not say that. Oh, I'm not saying that. That is actually external life. But we should not even think about that thought, which is a corruption before God. But the present age that we are living in right now, this age that we live in, not only are we speaking the things that are, when I say not only we, I'm talking about the general community, the humanity today. The spirit of this age, the zeitgeist of his age, is actually speaking out foul and vulgar things because the mind is corrupted. And because the mind is corrupt, the human spirit in itself is corrupted. Right? The corruption has gone deep within. When a baby is born and the baby grows up, that society and the conscientious mind within that baby, even without God, right, would live with a sense of societal ethics and societal ethics and some sort of a morality and consciousness of good and bad is there in that child as the child grows up. But if the child is brought up in a corrupt society at a very younger age, the child is taught to think wrongly, and therefore speech becomes wrong. And when the thought is wrong, the spirit, because it's from the spirit all the movements of a human being comes. Spirit is a force behind the movements of a human being. So they start in the schools at a very young age. They teach the children to cross dress. They tell the children, what do you feel? Do you feel like a boy or a girl today? Well, if you feel like they'll ask the boys this and then say, if you feel like a girl today, why don't you dress like that? Right. So in doing so, that thought is okay or made okay to the child. The conscience is prepared for this kind of vulgarity as the boy grows up. And it's made to seem normal. And so when the boy grows up, motivated by the spirit of this age, of course, number one. Number two, also because of the intense darkness, even church that needs to be the light is not light. And so because of the intense darkness of the surrounding society. And number three, not only the spirit of this age, but the spirit that controls human mind, which is the spirit of the devil himself, will press this young human being into the fashions and the passions of this world. And in doing so, what happens is a whole society is corrupted. It is said that I heard a statistics today about 80 plus senior citizens. I think it's 80, if I'm not 80 or 85, 80 plus. Only 9%, 8 or 9% of that age group, they do not conform to any religion. Only 8 to 9% of 81 years of 81 plus. But the modern youth, about 1/3 of the modern youth don't have a God. They don't recognize or organize themselves under anything that is divine or religious. And because of the 1/3, that's 33%. Because of that, they are a law unto themselves. And because of that, there's much corruption in the society. As the older generation becomes weaker and weaker, their influence in the society is lower and lower. What happens is the younger generation comes up with this kind of godless attitude, and they corrupt the human spirit and the spirit of the society. And so, we are at a time right now, and it is going on. By the way, we need to understand one thing. The root cause for this problem is the church. Okay? If we think that the world is the problem, world has always been the problem. What you see right now in the United States, since what has happened in the court and the Roe v. Wade, decision, probably it's going to be overturned. And the fact that there is going to be riots and great turmoil in capital cities, if that is the case, the fact that these people are threatening it, and the fact that they want to butcher and kill babies. Major organizations now are funding abortion, right? They're basically telling their employees, if you want to have an abortion per year, we will give you $5,000 for every employee, so that you can go across state and have abortion, come back. And you know what? People want it. Politicians don't care. Of course, they are all Christians when election comes. And after election, they are Corinthians. So there is mass delusion, number one. There is a mass confusion. mass corruption, and the church is along with it. That is why Peter says the judgment of God has to start in the house of God. And if this is the situation in the house of God, how worse will it be for the ungodly and the unrighteous? Remember, even today there is only a remnant. There is only a remnant that has their thought life within the boundaries of the commandment. And because of that, their active life is also within the boundaries of the commandment. Or at least they desire to live like that. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, let us turn there. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and the last verse 16. For who has known the mind of the Lord that he will instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. But the question is, are we using it? We have the mind of Christ, yes, but are we using it? We have the Spirit of the Lord inside, yes, residing, abiding in us. Are we using it? We are in Christ through faith, baptism, and through the Spirit, and by the Spirit. Are we bearing fruit? Are we using the mind of Christ, or are we using our soulish mind in dealing with our day-to-day activities? Remember, we all can be very pious on Sunday. We all can be very pious because we are brought to that kind of thought when we are sitting for a prayer meeting. And it's not hypocrisy. It's just that, we are very convinced that, we have come for prayer meeting, and there is a sense of the fear of the Lord in a prayer meeting. Yes. But what about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Do we entertain thoughts that are corrupting us? Do we entertain words in our mind that corrupts us? Because it's finally thoughts that end up in words. Right? I'm not saying, there are no accidental sentences or phrases that come out of our mouth. There are, yes. But I'd say most of the time. Most of the time. So I have titled today's in the news commentary as Corruption of the Human Spirit. And we are thoroughly in it. Both in the conditions of nations, also in the condition of individuals, in conditions of society. And if you basically focus down to the condition of the individual and the condition of the church too. Corruption of the spirit, which is what we are called to overcome, is rampant. Again, I'm not saying everybody in the church, but sizable number. It is that, we are not even trying to keep straight. Right? Or probably we are taking liberties with the Lord Jesus. It may be that also, what? We know that He is forgiving and He is gracious, and so we are taking liberties with Him, with a gracious God. But there are consequences to it. Society becomes corrupt. We ourselves become corrupt. The work of grace is not completed within us, or we do not allow the work of grace to be completed within us. Ram Party is an Arab Islamic party inside Israel. It is actually one of the recognized parties inside Israel. It's basically an Arab Palestinian party. It's an Islamist party. They are not, though they are inside Israel, and these Arabs are citizens of Israel, they have the right to what as you would know, about 2 million, about 1 or 2 million of them are Arabs. They're Palestinian Arabs inside Israel. Out of 8 million citizens, about 6 million to 8, I think about 9 or 10 million right now, 6 to 8 is actually Jews, and the remaining 2 is actually Palestinian Arabs. Now, Ram Party is actually a party that represents the Palestinian Arabs inside Israel. And this is its leader, Mansour Abbas. And Ram Party's guiding charter backs Palestinian right of return, calls Zionism racist. No, so this is a party inside, a legal party inside Israel that calls the very principle of Israel to be corrupt and racist. To them, Zionism is just like apartheid of the South African people or South African whites. They are anti-Israel. They say Israel shouldn't be for the Jews, it should be for the Palestinians. And he should allow all the Palestinians to return back, and eventually, of course, they would want the Jews to leave to Europe or drown in the sea, one of those. And so what happened is he became a kingmaker. Why? Because the two main parties in Israel, the Likud and the Conservative Party, I forget the name. Likud and I forget the name of the other party. None of them have a majority. None of them can carry the parliament. So there is this Arab leader. He's an Islamist leader, of the Ram Party. He's got 4 seats. So both sides of the Jews are actually where this happened in 21. They were wowing each other, right? The Likud, the left and the right, the Likud party as well as the Conservative Party, they were trying to get the 4 seats that belong to the Ram Party towards that side so that they can form a government. So the Jews are making a covenant with the Palestinian Arabs inside Israel who hate them. So finally, here is the present Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett. He belonged to the Conservative Party. He and his friends had 7 seats, about 6 or 7 seats. Of course, they cannot run the government because they got only 7 seats. There should be at least 61 seats for a majority party to rule. So Likud and the Conservative Party, these are the 2 major parties. And Bennett being one of the shrewd politicians, he got out of the Conservative Party because he had a issue with the previous prime minister. And you know what? He joined with the left, with the Likud party, Lipid. And then, he moved in this Ram party leader. So finally, they formed a unity government, Jews and the Arabs who want the neck of the Jews. They both joined together to form a form a government. The government had 61 seats, and the Arabs and the opposition had 60 seats, so 1 seat majority. If the Jews can make a covenant with the Islamic Arab Party that has vowed its demise, would it be difficult to believe that some will make a deal with the Antichrist? Is it so difficult for us to believe that this same category of Jews who are power hungry, they will make a deal even with the devil so that they can deal, they can, rule? It shouldn't be a surprise to any one of us that, they will make a deal with the Antichrist. That's exactly what Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 says. He, the Antichrist, will make a covenant with many in Israel. That's what is said there. Let us turn there. Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. And he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. See, the Antichrist will make a covenant with many, just like the left party, along with Naphtali Bennett's 7th seat, including the Ram party. They made a covenant with the Ram party, and even right now, as riots are going on, the Arab parties are not with the government, though they are part of the government. They are not with the government, because their anti-Israel tendencies, their anti-Jewish tendencies are evident right now. So this government will fail pretty soon, because Naphtali Bennett has basically said, we're going to crush this terrorism that is going on right now. And the Ram party would not like that, because it's their people that is, well, it's not their people directly, but it's their support. They support these people who are doing this right now in Israel. Even, I think yesterday, or day before yesterday, 3 fathers were axed down in Elad, in a place called Elad. Right? The reign of terror is going on right now. But you know what? Being in power is more important. So make a deal with the devil. It's not surprising, with what is going on right now. The Jews will know, at least a part of the Jewry will be willing to make a covenant with the Antichrist, as long as they can keep the power. So the deception is already at work. If we can clearly look at it, the deception is already at work. To keep the power, deal or compromise with your enemies. This is exactly what Judah did in the days of King Hezekiah. God said, never go and ask for help from Egypt. Don't make an alliance with Egypt. Serve me, call me, I will answer you. But Hezekiah sent donkeys and sheep and shepherds, and horses, filled with gifts and presents to Egypt, because he found out that, the Assyrian king is coming down to deal with him. So he wanted Egypt's help. Because where God says no, for, instant salvation, right? We make immediate compromises, which is not liked by our God. That's where Israel is right now. Again, this problem keeps on rising up. Now the problem is fertilizer. Historic fertilizer crunch threatens food security. For the first time ever, farmers the world over, all at the same time, are testing the limits of how little chemical fertilizers they can apply without devastating their yields come harvest time. Early predictions are bleak. What comes next after Roe v. Wade is overturned, chaos on the streets of Washington like we have never seen before. That's what they are threatening. Now, it is true that Roe v. Wade would be overturned, and the decisions whether will go back to the state, and the state will decide whether each state will decide whether they want abortion in their state boundaries or not. Abortion is not made illegal. But this rule that started in 1974, if I'm not wrong, by the courts then, which made abortion universal inside the United States, anywhere and everywhere, now would be turned to the states. And so there'll be certain states that would not want abortion, especially Texas. It looks like Louisiana is going to make abortion a homicide. So there'll be many states where abortion is going to be legal. But the corporate, basically Amazon and other corporate Lyft, Uber, and these kind of large corporate giants are paying their employees $5,000 a year if they want to take an abortion outside the state, in a complying state. But they want to keep killing babies. Remember women's liberation? liberated from the families. But in the pursuit of pleasure and hedonism, they have to squash the result of their actions. They have to choke. So they have turned their wombs into tombs, right? And therefore they themselves will suffer death. That's why they are all screaming out and they are threatening violence, because this is a cult. Actually, this is a cult. This is a cult. This is a religious fervor. Just like Ephesus was taken over by the uproar on behalf of Artemis, so also this whole nation will be taken over by the fire. At least that's what they have threatened. Once the court decision comes out. Right now, the court decision has not come out. It is just that, they do internal deliberations and they vote on it. And then I think in late summer, if I'm not wrong, that's when the decisions come out. So somebody leaked this opinion that was written by the majority, especially Justice Alito, to the public. They leaked it to Politico, and they came out with this news. On the other hand, wearable device measures growing array of health indicators, and so they can spy on each one of us. That's the whole purpose. And finally, by the way, all these health devices are connected to the internet also. So not only can they spy, they can also know where we are. Right? Almost all of them have a camera device one way or the other. Some of them check our blood condition. Some of them check when we sleep, what time we sleep, when are we going into the deep sleep, and all sorts of stuff. Where are we going? They track out, our footsteps, and all sorts of tracking is going on. And these are all connected to the internet, Wi-Fi, or through, cell phone networks. Anyways, we are online anyways for people to track us regardless. The Scottish Kirk, this is actually a sect of the Presbyterian Church, is to become the next Protestant church to adopt same-sex marriage. Yet another Protestant church in Europe is redefining marriage, as if they don't have a Bible. The Kirk, Scotland's historic Calvinistic Presbyterian church, is expected to approve in May the celebration of same-sex marriage. As it has happened in other places, there has been a debate happening inside the Church of Scotland for many years between those who defend a historic biblical understanding of marriage. It's not a historical biblical understanding of marriage. That's the only divine marriage that we have. There's nothing to do with history. It's just nothing to do with, in the sense, this term biblical. It is made to sound as if it's more professorial or university-like, a technical term. A man and a woman is the only kind of marriage that is marriage. All others are not marriage. They're immorality. Well, that kind of a thought process right now is abnormal. We are all out of the normal if we think like that. As it has happened in other places, there has been a debate happening inside the Church of Scotland for many years between those who defend a historic biblical understanding of marriage and those promoting more theologically liberal approach to sexual ethics. Why don't they just read the Bible and follow it? No, they cannot, because their mind is corrupt. They want to continue their corrupt mind. And even in their churches, they want to do this. So it's all couched in, sensitivity and, being kind and all these things. Instead of saying this is wicked and an abomination, this shouldn't be in the church. That's not the case. The church allowed in 2016 its worship ministers to enter civil same-sex marriages or unions. Now, is this a new thing? Is this kind of thing a new thing? No, it's not a new thing. If we go to 2 Kings chapter 23, there's always, we can see in the scriptures that this is not the first time that the house of God has been corrupted by these kind of thought processes. Second Kings chapter 23, verse 7. He, that is Josiah, he also broke down the houses of male cult prostitutes, which were in the house of the Lord, where the women were weaving hangings for Asherah. Male cult prostitutes are sodomites, homosexuals. They were there for men as rituals. The act was a ritualistic, cultic act. And where were the men living for this kind of thing? Inside the temple. Inside the temple, inside Solomon's temple. There was a section made for whom? Made for the sodomites. Made for the cultic male prostitutes. So right now, we have these things inside the Protestant churches, so-called Protestant churches. The house of God, or the so-called house of God, been taken over by these things. By the way, you think this is aberrant? Don't think that the Pentecostals are not going to do it. Pentecostal institutions are also going to do it. They are also going to do it. Pretty soon, the churches out here, I think, secretively, they all accept these things. It is only a matter of time institutionally, they will accept. By the way, if we have come to this point where churches, basically Protestant churches are adopting same-sex marriage, understand one thing. God is already judging the church. These notions, right, these kind of things, doesn't happen normally. Man and woman relationship and the aberrance in that relationship, immorality in that relationship has been going on for centuries, widely. But within the church, there has been a morality that is kept. But in the last 50 or 60 years, even normal marriages have been corrupted. Divorce is rampant in the church, rampant. Immorality is rampant. What is it? Sequential, some pastors, I think a pastor called it sequential polygamy. Marrying 3 times, right? You divorce the first wife, marry the second. You divorce the second wife, marry the third. That's called sequential polygamy. So for the last 30, 40 years, at least the Western churches have been doing this, and so also the Eastern churches in many cases. So now we know what the Lord is saying. All right, you want to go do these things? Go on. Now this is the next stage. God has given them off to corruption. Because we, or the church, and when I say we, I'm not saying personally in a we sense. I'm saying collectively as a church, we have accepted the breakage of normal commandments of God, the violation of the normal commandments of God. And God is saying, you know what? Go ahead. Now I'll let you go into complete hardness. Go and do vulgarity. That's what Romans chapter 1 says. So whether we understand it or not, the church is already being judged. Already being judged. This is going to be, I just heard this last week and this week about a person, even in Malayali churches, amongst Malayali community, I'm talking about conservative Malayali Pentecostal brethren churches, I'm talking about these conservative churches, okay? Protestant churches in Kerala. These things are talked about and accepted and allowed privately and secretively. In some cases, publicly. So the judgment is coming in its actually the immoral form of its judgment, where God is giving people off to hardness of heart. So just like he hardened the heart of the Pharaoh so that finally that Pharaoh would be prepared for the final assault of God's judgment. Likewise, these people, right? If you violate the small and the simple commandments, only a matter of time you violate the egregious commandments. You become abominable. So the church is already judged. The Protestant church, the so-called Protestant church, organized, I would say the organizations, are already judged because they have compromised and allowed all sorts of other vulgarities. Even abortion, abortion and divorce, immorality in marriages. All these, because what the pastors require is just attendance. Just come and sit. That's all. We just need to have a large church. We need to show some people that we have a large church. So the Lord is saying, okay, have some of these also within there. Because you have already compromised. You have thrown my word to the side. In the midst of all these things, we should keep what we have received. Just like what the Lord said, oh Lord, encourage the church in Thyatira. Hold on to what you have received. Because in the midst of all these compromises, right, it is important to hold on to this good old-time religion, to the precepts, divinely ordained precepts and commandments of God. Not just with our mouth, but with our heart. We need to keep it with our heart. Right? Not just speak with our mouth. We need to keep it with our heart. Let the Lord enable us. Praise the Lord.